Hey guys, this is Georg from Gev Loves Tennis. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Australian Open, which just finished. If you're subscribed to this channel or if you're watching this content, I think you might be a tennis fan. So I thought I'd start making some content where I talk about what's going on in the tennis world. I mentioned in a few other videos that I'd like to do that, and this seemed like a good opportunity to do that. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to this channel and you're stumbling on this video, basically this channel is just all about tennis. I have some instructional videos, I have some match play videos, and now I'm gonna try to make more content like this as well, where I just talk about the tennis world. So if you're a tennis fan, take a look at the channel, and if it looks interesting, please feel free to subscribe. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But a couple quick thoughts on the tournament for me. I'll just talk a little bit about the men's tournament and the women's singles events. So on the women's side, Osaka won the event, Naomi Osaka. I watched her match with Serena. I watched a little bit of her match. I think it was a third round match with someone, she might have been Middle Eastern or African. She was like a top 30 player. I watched some of that match. And I was just watching some of the highlights of the final. I live in Los Angeles, so it's kind of late to stay up to watch some of these matches, although I have done it so in the past, but usually I do it if it's Federer. But I watched quite a lot of the day matches for this event, and my thought is that Osaka seems to be the emerging as a really legit contender on the women's side, maybe the next big consistent Grand Slam champion. I mean, she's already won 4 majors. She's won 2 Australian Opens, 2 US Opens. She's awesome on hard court. Maybe the next step for her is to see how she does on clay at the French Open, how she does on grass at Wimbledon. That'll be interesting to see. So yeah, I think one big takeaway is, Naomi's definitely the person to beat on the women's side. I think another takeaway for me is Serena is, she's been struggling to win a major now for like 3-4 years after the birth of her child. She hasn't won a single major. But she's close. She's making semis, she's making finals, but she's having a hard time kind of sealing the deal. And she's had a few losses already now to Osaka, and I don't even think she's won a set against her. So I think it kind of reminds me a little bit of Agassi towards the end of his career when he played Roger Federer. Where he would lost like 5-6 matches in a row to him at the end of his career, including at the Australian Open quarters, US Open final in 2005, and maybe it's just at a point where Serena is just not good enough to be able to beat Osaka, and she's going to have a hard time winning majors if she can't do that. And it's a little bit like what's happened with Federer now and Djokovic. You look at the last 5-6 times Federer has played Djokovic in majors, whether it's at Wimbledon or the US Open, he just hasn't been able to beat him. And it gets tough, as you get towards the end of your career and you have these younger players that are emerging. Sometimes that's really what sort of ends the career of these older players, is that they just can't beat the younger players anymore. So I think that'll be interesting. But she's still doing well. She's still making the semis. She's still making the finals. So I think maybe if she gets a bit lucky with a draw, she avoids Osaka. And Osaka hasn't proven to be a great contender yet on clay and on grass. So honestly, I think Serena's best chance probably is Wimbledon, just like Rogers. Jen Brady also looks like she's emerging as another contender. She's now made the semis of the US Open, the finals of Australia. So she seems to be a pretty solid contender. And I'm also interested in Swiatek. She also had a pretty good tournament here, made the fourth round, lost a tough match to Halep. And she's only 19, and she seems like she's the real deal too. And I'm curious to see how she'll do at the French Open and on clay, because last year she won the French Open without losing a single set. So she was awesome there. So those are some of my, I guess, thoughts on the women's side. I remember watching the Serena Williams Sabalenka match, which I thought was very entertaining. A lot of big hitting. So it's fun. Women's tennis, to me, I enjoy it. And I find it interesting just to see just kind of the differences in the style between women's players and the men's players. Um, on the men's side, obviously, Novak Djokovic won the event. No major surprise there. He's won this tournament 9 times already. It's sort of like, Rafa at the French Open where he's won it 13 times, or maybe kind of like Roger at Wimbledon where he's won it 8 times, except even more dominant than the 8, because first of all, he's won it 9, and Novak's beaten Roger in 3 Wimbledon finals, the last 3 times they played at Wimbledon. So there's no doubt, this is his tournament. He just seems to do really well here. I don't know what specifically explains that. Maybe it's the first major of the season. Maybe it's the surface. Maybe it's the country. There's just something about it. But it's the first Grand Slam he won in 2008. And then he had a couple years where he didn't win. And then he won again in 2011 for the first time in a major, again, his second major, which was also in Australia. So it just seems like this is his best tournament. And, a couple thoughts on the tournament. I mean, I thought Medvedev would have a better performance than what he did. To lose in straight sets, 7-5, 6-2, 6-2 is pretty disappointing. I didn't necessarily think he would win, but I thought it would be 4 sets, 5 sets. But, I woke up this morning, I look at the score, and I was just like, yeah, okay, that's not a shock. Because I remember a couple of years ago, Rafa was playing great tennis going into the final. I think that's 2019. And I thought, well, this is going to be a 5-setter. It's going to be an amazing match. And then you look at the score, and it was like, a scoreline you would see Novak have in the first round of this tournament. So sometimes I think he just plays his best tennis at the very end of this tournament, like the semis and finals. He just goes to another level. And, I do think some of the younger players like Tsitsipas and Medvedev are emerging, and Zverev, and are knocking on the door. Tsitsipas beat Nadal in a 5-set match. He came back from 2 sets down. Even in the French Open last year, he was down 2 sets to Novak, and he almost won that match. Got to a 5th set. Zverev took Djokovic to 4 sets. So they're becoming more consistent in the majors and knocking on the door, but at the end of the day, they're still having a hard time beating Rafa and Novak and overtaking those guys. And, I was a little disappointed in Thiem's performance in this event. Dominic Thiem, I thought he would do better, but he had a bizarre 4th round match against Dimitrov where he just sort of disappeared. Lost 6-0 in the 3rd set. And then Dimitrov had a whacking match in the quarterfinals against, was it Karatsev, the Russian guy that no one had heard of, that somehow made it to the semis of this event as a qualifier. And he had never even made a Grand Slam tournament before, a main draw, until this event, and he's 27 years old, which is incredible. And of course Djokovic beat him very easily in the semis. But I guess another topic with this tournament, especially on the men's side, is you just did see quite a lot of injuries. Like Dimitrov was just, I don't know what happened to him, but he just couldn't play anymore at the end of his match against Karatsev. He was playing like me, like just some recreational tennis player. He could barely get his serve in. He was hitting his serves like 50, 60 miles per hour. He couldn't really move on the court. And I think some people were saying that because of the quarantine, because of all the crazy things that happened, that the players really didn't have the right preparation for this tournament. And I saw Zverev and Djokovic were talking about how, maybe they should just consider not really having a traveling circuit this year because of COVID, and just play in like one location or one or two locations. And Zverev was like, why have tournaments in Europe? I mean, there's probably not going to be any fans there anyways. So it's like, what's the point? The whole point of tennis players traveling all around the world is basically so that we as tennis fans can get to see these players live, right? Like as a tennis fan in Los Angeles, can go to Palm Springs or Indian Wells, which is around Palm Springs, and watch that event. And if you live in Miami, you can go to the Miami Open. If you live in New York, you can go to the U.S. Open. But it's like, if there's no fans allowed, what difference does it make if they play, on a hard court event in one location versus they travel around the world and they play these events, but there's no fans there? I think it's an interesting point. I don't know how things will play out, but we'll see what happens with that. I don't think they'll do that. Well, they'll just have everyone play in one place. Just seems too out there for me. But especially because I think COVID is starting to get a little bit better with the vaccines and all that. And even Djokovic, in the third round, I think he had some kind of injury, and I know a lot of people were saying, well, he might not be able to continue. And of course, he ends up winning the tournament. So overall, I would say, to summarize, I think the tournament kind of played out the way a lot of people would have predicted going in. Djokovic wins it on the men's side, and Osaka wins it on the women's side. Of course, you're starting to see some people emerge, especially on the men's side, younger players that can compete and challenge the established players like Rafa and Novak. But in the end, the result is all too predictable. It's Novak winning another major, and then on the women's side, we're starting to see a pretty predictable result of Osaka winning hardcourt majors. So that's really my thoughts on this tournament. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, feel free to subscribe, and let me know what you think. If you have any comments, please feel free to comment below in the video, and I'm gonna take a look at your comments, and I'd be interested to see what you guys thought about the tournament. So this is